Good morning, everyone. I call to order this meeting of the Audit and Compliance Committee, the University of Minnesota Board of Regents. I want to welcome you all this morning. You may recognize we have a new face at the Horseshoe, Chief Auditor Quinn Galswick. I want to welcome him to his first Audit and Compliance Committee, although he's not quite a new face. He's definitely been around here. Chair Powell will formally introduce him at the full board meeting tomorrow, but did want to welcome you at this moment. I'd also like to welcome our student representatives, Emily Kurtz, representing the Twin Cities campus, and Riley Tuft from the Duluth campus, who is joining us via Zoom. Thank you for joining us. And with that, let's turn to our agenda. Item 1 of the agenda is the external auditor's review of completed audit work. For this item, we'll be joined by Controller Sue Paulson, along with Ms. Stockendorf and Ms. Hoyam from Deloitte and Touche. Controller Paulson, the floor is yours when you're ready.
Good morning, Chair Kenyanya, committee members. The first agenda item today, Deloitte will provide a summary of the audit work and agreed upon procedure work that was completed since the last meeting of the Audit and Compliance Committee in December. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Ms. Stockendorf and Ms. Hoyam.
Good morning. Thank you for having us, Chair Kenyanya and members of the committee. I'm Judy Dockendorf, the Managing Director, and I lead the work that Deloitte does for the University of Minnesota. And as Controller Paulson mentioned, I have Nicole Hoyam with me today as well. I'm going to start by walking you through the results of the remaining work we did for fiscal 21. So the agreed upon procedures and some compliance work for the year ended June 30th, 2021. Oh, here, will you change? Oh, there we go. Okay. Sorry about that. All right, so here's just a quick snapshot of the 4 items that remained related to fiscal 2021, and we have detail on each of these services on further slides. So I will turn to those. So the first item being the federal compliance audit. This is driven by the Office of Management and Budget, and this relates to federal expenditures that the university has made during the fiscal year. The threshold here required for an audit is $750,000, and you can see that the university has expended over $1 billion in federal awards in fiscal 21. The university does continue to qualify as a low-risk auditee, and that's really because of the results of the audits that we've done in prior years and the great compliance work that the different departments have related to federal dollars. Here's a snapshot of the programs that were selected for testing. So across the over $1 billion of federal expenditures, we selected 5 different programs for testing. That testing includes looking at internal controls related to compliance attributes specific to those programs, as well as making compliance tests. So making selections of expenditures, ensuring they were made in accordance with grant agreements, looking at reports that might be required by those grant agreements, looking at any amounts that go to subrecipients, and ensuring that all those expenditures are in accordance with the grant agreements. For each of those programs, we issued unmodified or clean opinions. That's the highest level of an opinion we can provide. And we identified no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal control, and no material instances of non-compliance or findings or question cost. So a lot of work here, a lot of sample selections made across each of these programs, but great controls continue to be in place, similar to prior years as we've seen at the university. From a compliance perspective, we also look at financial aid that's distributed to students from the state of Minnesota. So the state of Minnesota, in addition to students getting federal financial aid, which was subject to the audit under uniform grant guidance that I just talked about, the state of Minnesota requires us to perform examination procedures at each campus. So here we're making samples of students and ensuring that they were eligible for the financial aid that they were awarded, that the amount awarded to them was appropriate, and again, any reporting was done appropriately. There are 4 reports issued, 1 for each campus, and those were issued in January, and no findings were identified for any of the campuses. And then 2 agreed upon procedures engagements, both for the NCAA, 1 for the Twin Cities campus. This is done every year. So the NCAA puts out a set of agreed upon procedures for all Division I institutions that guide the procedures we perform. That's making selections of revenues received, expenditures made, aid that goes out to athletes, policies and procedures that are in place, and if those align with what the NCAA requires. Our report was issued in December for the Twin Cities campus, and no findings were identified. And then additionally, every 3 years, both Duluth and Crookston are subject to similar procedures as required by the NCAA. So 2021, Duluth was the winner there of being subject to agreed upon procedures, and we here perform slightly less procedures than we perform for the Twin Cities campus. There's differences between Division I and II institutions and requirements from the NCAA. This report was issued in January, and there were no findings identified here. I believe you do have copies of all of these reports as part of the board materials, and then the uniform grant guidance report that was completed earlier this week. So that's a quick summary for you of the remaining 2021 items, and we'd be happy to answer questions before Nicole talks about 2022.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
just, ma'am, if I could, from the 10,000-foot level, not getting into, excuse me, any specifics, you found no question costs in any of your findings at all?
Ms. Dockendorf?
Chair Kenyana, Regent Swigum, there was nothing over the required, there's a threshold of $25,000 for reporting findings and question costs. But in the selections we made, there were no question costs in any of the selections we made.
And we were not found to be out of compliance in any area that you, in any of the findings you had?
Correct.
Okay, so from the 10,000-foot level, it looks
good.
Looks copacetic.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Chair Kenyana, Regent Swigum, a lot of work, obviously, that goes into this, but big dollars the university is receiving, and the areas we're testing in seem to have and continue to have really good internal controls in place. And one of the programs we tested was the higher education emergency relief dollars, which were new in 2020. We and then continued into 2021 and have continued into 2022 as well. And there were nuances there, but the university did a great job getting out ahead of that and making sure they understood the complexities there, and no findings were noted.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I just feel compelled to say that this is remarkable, that the university really attends to its business well, and I'm grateful to everyone that participates in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Davenport. To move on to the next item.
Okay, thank you.
The second agenda item, Chair Kenyanya and committee members, is the audit plan work for fiscal 2022. What Deloitte just covered was the last work that was completed for fiscal 21. And I believe Ms. Hoyam is going to cover the plan for FY22.
Ms. Hoyam.
All right, so under generally accepted auditing standards, the purpose of our audit is to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements are free from material misstatement. This concept of materiality is what we use to scope and risk assess our procedures. Essentially, materiality is what we believe users of the financial statement might find as a figure that would influence their decisions based off of the financial information. For internal control, we do not take an internal control reliance for our substantive testing. However, we do test design and implementation of controls over key controls that address significant risks. And we review the reports of the internal audit function and their findings, but we do not use their direct assistance in our audit procedures. So we are required to communicate any identified significant risks, and a significant risk is essentially an area that we put more audit attention and focus on because there are either judgments or complexities or higher susceptibility to fraud in these areas. So as of the date of our planning communication here, the first significant risk we've identified is management override of controls. Now, this is a presumed risk across all entities. And the procedures we perform to address this are design and implementation testing of controls over financial close and reporting. We perform inquiries with management and others throughout the organization on their views of fraud and potential risks. And we also profile journal entries performed during the closing period for potential characteristics of audit interest. We would evaluate any estimates for potential bias and accounting treatment for any significant or unusual transactions. Our next significant risk identified here is the valuation of alternative investments. The university has a very material portfolio of investments, and a lot of these investments are harder to value items that aren't publicly traded necessarily. So we perform procedures by sending confirmations to custodians to confirm the existence. And then we also perform pricing procedures to corroborate the valuation of these items. And then we test design and implementation of controls that address investment valuation in the portfolio as a whole. So in addition to our financial statement audit, our other attestation services are going to include, we do a statutory audit for Ruminco, that's under a specific Insurance Act requirement. And then again, our recurring attestation engagements will include the Uniform Grant Guidance audit, and then the Office of Higher Education examination. And then we are going to be performing the Twin Cities campus NCAA agreed upon procedures, since those are performed annually this year. In terms of the timing of our fieldwork and procedures, we generally start kind of our planning and risk assessment in the spring here. And then we come back in the fall for wrapping up our substantive procedures and reporting testing. And then we tend to issue our report for the financial statement audit in October. And then the other engagements, we issue those throughout December and early 2023 is anticipated. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I'll start it off. If you could go to slide 3, I thought that was a very helpful slide, especially for us non-auditors to understand what you're looking for. I think I understood the first and third item pretty well. Can you talk to that second one in terms of not adopting a control reliance strategy and what that means?
Sure, I'll take that, Chair Kenyana. Separate from a public company, an SEC reporting entity that's required to have their auditors opine on internal control, we are not required to do that for the University of Minnesota for the financial statement audit. So we use internal control to gain an understanding and ensure that the control environment's sound, there's good tone at the top, there's things like reconciliations, reviews of expenditures, financial statements, those are all in place. But if we were to take a control reliance strategy, that level of work becomes very voluminous. We're looking at internal controls all the way to operating effectiveness across business processes. So in the revenue process, in the expenditure process, and we're down transaction level detail, making selections to understand the operating effectiveness of internal controls. So it could be, 30 to 40% more time if we were to take a control reliance approach and opine on internal controls. And as that's not required for the university for the financial statement audit, we have not taken a control reliance approach in our audit.
Okay, thank you. And this follow-up could be for Controller Paulson or Chief Auditor Galswick, I'm not sure, but is there a benefit in doing that, perhaps not annually, but after a given period, saying, okay, we do want someone to opine on these controls after a certain period of time?
Sure, I can speak to that, Chair Kenyanya, members of the committee. So within our internal audit function, we're always looking at the internal controls, and we look at it in terms of the design of those controls and the operating effectiveness. So that is part of just our regular work that we're always doing. The difference here is Deloitte is not relying on those controls as part of their overall opinion. So we are taking a look at those controls. We are ensuring that they're operating effectively. It's just not as part of the financials external review.
All right, thank you. Yes, Controller Paulson.
Chair Kenyanya, committee members, if I might add, through some of the other compliance work that Deloitte does for the university, the uniform guidance is a great example. They are then sampling certain types of internal control processes and procedures specific to those federal programs. So if you think about it from that perspective, many of those same internal controls that they might be sampling through that process also would extend to certain other types of activities at the university, including some of them that would be included in the preparation of the financial statements.
Thank you, that was helpful. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, I think we can move on to our next agenda item. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
the presentation. Next on our agenda is a discussion on academic and research misconduct processes. We have a team of presenters joining us, including Tina Marison, the Associate Vice President and EOAA Director, Francis Lorenz, AVP for Research, Tamar Gronval, Director of Office for Conflict Resolution, and our Chief Compliance Officer, Boyd Coomer. Once you're all settled, I will turn it over to Chief Auditor Galswick for introductory comments and for the subsequent presentation. Chief Auditor.
All right, thank you, Chair Kenyanya and members of the committee. What we're presenting to you today is on academic and research misconduct processes at the institution. This is a follow-up to our annual audit report, or sorry, not annual audit report, our audit report that we issued in October 2021. So as part of this presentation, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the findings of that audit report, kind of what we looked at, et cetera. And before I turn it over to the other presenters, to give you a little bit more information about how their units handle cases or allegations of misconduct. At the end of the presentation, Boyd will also be providing some additional information related to the remediation of some of the areas for considerations for improvement that we identified within that audit report. So I'll let him get into that in a little more detail at the end. So to begin with, the audit report that we issued reviewed academic and research misconduct broadly, looking at the procedures to ensure effectiveness, efficiency, and fairness within those processes. I think it's important for the committee to know that overall, this report confirmed that risk is well managed. Were no report level issues that were identified as part of this report. However, we did identify that processes vary between the various reporting units that are involved in allegations of misconduct. And we noted, as I said previously, some considerations for improvement. Two considerations for improvement that directly impact the Board of Regents, we're going to be digging into a little bit more today. And that's first, using a consistent academic and research misconduct definition. There's some variance between how that definition is used in board policy and academic policy, again, which Boyd will be going into further later. The second consideration that impacts the board is the comprehensive combined misconduct reporting and or using a common misconduct management system. So this is so you can get a more holistic view of all of the various allegations of misconduct that have been brought to you or have been brought to the various groups that would investigate it and what those results may be. The common misconduct management system is really trying to maintain some continuity between the various groups that are digging into these to ensure consistency, et cetera. But again, we'll talk about that more later. I think it's important to note that in addition to this report and some of the work that's being done in this space, there's additional work being done that the president has asked to be done related to the Faculty Misconduct Task Force. So this task force was initiated as a system-wide effort to advise on faculty misconduct response processes. And as a subset of that, there's also the Provost Task Force on Faculty Behavior with graduate students. And this is really just focused on that relationship between faculty and graduate students. So the work with the Provost Task Force is expected to be completed in March of 2022, and that should help inform the overall recommendations that will come out of the Faculty Misconduct Task Force in May 2022. So I just want to make sure you're aware that there's work happening in this space beyond what we're talking about here today. So this slide is just to give you a little bit of a sense of the number of units that are involved in these allegations of misconduct and the case counts in which they're working on. I want to note, though, these case counts are not perfect. These are an approximation, and in some cases may include some double reporting where an individual first reports it to one unit who then references it to another unit for further investigation, and it gets double counted. However, I think it gives you an idea of the breadth and scope of the various units that are involved in this process. The four at the top of this bolded are the units that are going to be presenting to you today, with giving you a little bit more information about how they handle these allegations of misconduct. And with that, I will turn it over to Tina Marasam to give you an understanding of how EOAA handles these allegations.
AVP Marison.
Good morning, Chair Kenyanya, members of the committee. So I'm here to provide an overview of the role of EOAA, or Office of Equal Opportunity and Affirmative Action. And EOAA responds to reports of discrimination, sexual misconduct, and related retaliation. And we respond to these reports from all campuses, and also to reports that involve students, staff, faculty, and guests. The only exception is that EOAA does not respond to reports that students have engaged in discrimination. The campus student conduct offices respond to those reports. EOAA responds to reports in two ways, either through informal problem-solving processes or formal investigation processes. So our informal processes can include a range of strategies aimed at stopping potential misconduct and also preventing future concerns. For example, in an informal process, we might inform a respondent or a person who's been accused of engaging in misconduct about the concerns that were raised and also about any reported impact on the complainant or community. A supervisor or other appropriate person may set or reiterate behavioral expectations or provide coaching. And that supervisor or other appropriate person may then monitor the work or educational environment going forward to ensure that no misconduct is occurring. These informal processes really let us tailor our response to the needs of the situation. They don't involve an investigation or a determination of whether university policy was violated or disciplinary action. And as you'll see in the data that I'll share with you in a later slide, we use informal processes to respond to the vast majority of the reports that we receive. And there are several reasons why we might use an informal process rather than a formal investigation process. First, we frequently use informal processes where the complainant, the person reporting that they've been harmed, is anonymous. And so we don't have sufficient information to initiate an investigation. Second, we often use informal processes where the conduct that's alleged that wouldn't rise to the level of a policy violation, but we'd still like to intervene and potentially interrupt concerning conduct before it escalates. Third, we may use an informal process when we receive a report from a complainant who tells us that they want the conduct to stop, but that they don't want to participate in an investigation process. And then finally, we may use informal processes in cases where the reported conduct may be covered by academic freedom or free speech protections and where an investigation would therefore not be appropriate. The second strategy that we use to respond to discrimination and sexual misconduct concerns is our formal investigation process. And a formal process consists of, among other things, an investigation, a decision on whether the respondent violated university policy, potential discipline, and also an opportunity for appeal. These investigations are conducted by EOAA staff members. EOAA employs 13 lawyers who aim to conduct investigations in ways that are thorough and effective, that are sensitive to the needs of the parties and witnesses, and also that incorporate robust procedural fairness protections. And some of these procedural fairness protections that are built into our investigation process are listed on the slide here. So before I finish up, I have two charts to show to you. The first chart shows the reports of employment discrimination, which includes sexual misconduct in employment. that we've received over the past 3 fiscal years. And the chart additionally shows the number of investigations that were conducted and the number of policy violations that were found each year. And you'll see that the number of reports remained relatively steady over the past 3 years, with 300 to 400 reports each year. There was a bit of a dip in FY21, likely due to remote work and the pandemic. But you can also see that the vast majority of the reports were addressed through our informal processes rather than our formal investigation process. So this second and final chart shows reported sexual misconduct by students over the past 3 fiscal years. And you'll see that we did have a significant decrease in reports of sexual misconduct by students in FY21, again, likely because of the more remote working and learning environment. And again, you'll see that we responded to the vast number of reports through our informal processes rather than an investigation. So that concludes the information I wanted to share about EOAA's role, but I'm happy to answer any questions after the presentation.
Thank you, AVP Marison. Before we move on, I think Regent Swigum had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Marison, going back to the slide with the informal complaint process, and I just had a question regarding anonymous complaints. For my life, whatever my professional life has been, whenever I've got something anonymous in the mail or email or phone, somebody won't look at me or give me their name. Whatever it is goes directly into the file. I put no stock into it at all. If they don't have any credibility of putting their name or their eyes or face behind a statement, not always a complaint. Sometimes it's just a statement of complaint. Now, do we put lots of stock in our informal process on anonymous complaints, or are they kind of just talk to me about anonymous complaints? I just have no faith or credibility in somebody who doesn't put their voice, their name, their word behind a complaint.
AVP Marison.
Thank you, Chair Kenyanya, Regent Swigum. I appreciate the question. So when we receive an anonymous report, we likely are not going to have enough information to conduct an investigation. So based on that report, we're not determining whether or not that conduct happened because we just don't have enough information. What anonymous reports are really valuable to us for is that in this area, what we know is the vast majority of folks who experience discrimination and sexual misconduct don't report, for a variety of reasons. It's a strenuous process. They fear retaliation. They don't trust the process. And so what anonymous reports can be valuable for is letting us know that there might be a concern in a particular unit that we should look more into. So if we receive an anonymous report, generally, like let's say we receive an anonymous report that a faculty member is engaging in sexual misconduct against a student. Our approach would be we would reach out to probably the department chair in that unit, and we would want to ask, had they heard anything, right? Had there been any concerns? Had there been potentially students who have, abruptly and without reason withdrawn from the faculty member's advisee status, for example, right? Is there anything unusual that we should potentially follow up on? We might talk to, the other administrators in the unit who have a lot of contact from students and ask if they've heard concerns. And, sometimes what happens in these cases is once we identify that there might be a problem in the unit and we go and start asking questions, that we actually get connected with a complainant who has concerns and does want to talk to us. So I would say anonymous complaints are very valuable in this space because we just so often don't get information when concerns are happening, and they allow us to just focus in and to go and ask questions, and at the very least potentially have department leadership be be paying more attention if they're hearing complaints from students and kind of focusing in on those.
Mr. Chairman, Director Marison, I can see where if there's a pattern of complaints, a pattern of anonymous complaints, say from a department or whatever, that could be valuable. This has become such a sensitive area over the last 20 or 30 years, and every one of us can destroy another with an anonymous complaint that I don't have to put my voice or my word or my handshake to or my eyes. And I just, want to tread very, very lightly on anonymous complaints. And I can see where a pattern in the department would be of value. But if I want to go out and for some reason or another destroy the chair, and I wouldn't do that, Michael, but with some anonymous complaint, I think it's essentially, I think we need to tread very lightly with anonymity or whatever. Is that a word?
Thank you, Regent Swiggum. I think we can move on to the next presenter. If you were complete, I'm not cutting you off.
Oh, no, thank you.
Okay, okay, all right.
Are we ready? I'm on the Zoom. I'm Frances Lenz. Are you going to introduce me or not, or?
Yes, please go ahead with the presentation.
Okay. I'm AVP Lorenz. Thank you, Chair Kenyana, and members of the committee. Somebody's going to put my slides up, I believe.
Yep, we see them.
Oh, good, because I don't. Okay. Thank you. So I need the next slide. Yeah. So the definition of research misconduct first. Research misconduct, this definition and the processes that I'm going to talk about are presented by the federal government. So we didn't make these up. These are federally prescribed. Research misconduct is fabrication, falsification, or plagiarism in proposing, performing, or reviewing and reporting research. So it's a very narrow field. And in the UMM policy, in addition to the federal requirements, we have other fraudulent actions in research or other scholarly activity as research misconduct. So that's our policy. That's what research misconduct is. Next slide. So for it to be found as research misconduct, the conduct must be first research misconduct. It needs to be FFP or something directly related to research like that. It needs to be a significant departure from accepted practices of the relevant academic community. There's quite a bit of variation across disciplines in minor things. The big three are always the same, but there are some different ways to present stuff across different disciplines. The conduct has to be committed intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly. It can't be just a mistake. And it has to be proven by a preponderance of the evidence, not just one thing, but all of it together needs to be point to research misconduct. Next slide. The procedures that are followed is we receive an allegation of potential misconduct. There is an allegation review by the RIO, which is me, it's the Research Integrity Officer. After we make an allegation review, if it is determined by me that the data supporting this allegation are credible and sufficient, we go forward to an inquiry. Before we do the inquiry, we sequester any data that might be involved in the allegation. We do this, I do it, we get OGC's assistance. OIT seizes the computers, we take the computers as well, but they also freeze the internal, like your email and stuff, they can grab all of that. So we have it, you can't change it from where we start. And we also involve the person who's being allegated against their college officials. The inquiry, which is the next step, which is again an investigation into the quality of the data to support the research misconduct allegation. The inquiry can be conducted by myself or by an inquiry panel. And the inquiry panel has to have at least 3 members, and the members on the panel need to match or at least be comparable to the peers of the person who has received the allegation against them. If the inquiry panel believes that the evidence that they have is sufficiently credible and available, they move on to an investigation. The investigation is the only level at which research misconduct can be determined. The investigation panel goes over all the evidence, interviews everybody, decides and makes their opinion. They make their recommendation to the deciding official, which is the VPR, and that person makes the final misconduct decision, and then sanctions or disciplinary action are provided by the department chair or the college. And the next slide talks about the consequences of if we find research misconduct. Usually, if we find misconduct, the funding agency will bar or suspend people from receiving federal research support. So like if you're an NIH researcher and we find you guilty of misconduct, NIH will suspend your ability to apply for grants for any number of years, depending on the severity of the claim. They can require monitoring. They can publicize the finding. They publish a list of people who have been found guilty of misconduct. And in rare cases, they can actually bring criminal charges and fines. In terms of other things like internal to the university discipline, you could dismiss the person from the program or from the university. If it's a student or a postdoc, you could revoke their degree, for instance, if the information in the thesis was incorrect. You can make retractions of various abstracts or papers. And you, of course, get reputational harm to yourself and your colleagues. So that's research misconduct. I'll be glad to take questions if you have any.
Thank you, AVP Lawrence. I think let's get through the remaining two and then we can try to come back for questions. I believe next we have Director Gronvall.
Good morning, Chair Kenyanya, and good morning, Regents and Provost Croson and the student representatives. I'm Tamar Grunwald. I'm the Director for the Office for Conflict Resolution here at the University of Minnesota. I'll talk a little bit about how our office addresses academic and research misconduct. Quick reflection on who we serve. This isn't necessarily commonly known to a lot of people, but we provide timely and highly competent services to employees at all 5 system campuses, plus extension. So that includes several offices throughout the outstate Minnesota. We're available to non-labor represented employees. So that's faculty, tenure track, non-tenure track, P&A faculty, all P&A staff, all civil service staff, as well as student workers and graduate student workers in their employment capacity, as well as postdocs. So those are the employees that we serve. The reason we don't directly serve folks in a collective bargaining unit is because workplace conflict for them is guided by the specific terms of their collective bargaining contracts and agreements. However, we do serve employees that are involved in conflict with union employees if they are not themselves a union employee. We're unique here at the University of Minnesota in that we're independent from Human Resources, the Office of General Counsel, the President or Provost Office, or any other university units. We're also impartial. We advocate for a fair process and a resolution for everybody involved if that's possible, and really helping everyone to do the right thing. This independence and impartiality is really critical because so much of the work that we do in the academic and research misconduct reporting area is confidential, meaning people seek us out to get advice, coaching, strategic consultation, discussions about university resources, et cetera. So that independence is really important. Impartiality is really important too, so that we can serve everybody involved in a particular situation, even if they have different perspectives or have bring different information to the situation. As I mentioned, a lot of our work is in the informal assistance arena, and that work is, for the most part, confidential. Once in a while, folks will give us permission to share information about their situation in order to make official reports or to get other university resources and support. What we do and how we can help in this space, as I mentioned, a lot of our work is in the informal assistance space, what is often called ombuds office or ombudsperson's offices in other large institutions or higher education. These strategic consultations are confidential. They're individual strategy sessions. They often offer we offer an option for facilitated dialogues. Most folks think of those as mediations. They're a little bit different than mediations, but there's a recognition that sometimes folks need an outside entity to provide a level playing field to have a really difficult conversation. It is a really unique opportunity to have those difficult conversations and to work through folks talking face to face with our facilitation. The process moves very quickly, and there's an emphasis on preserving and then improving ongoing relationships with the realization that employees often work with each other for long periods of time and will continue to work with each other. The second service we provide is we oversee the formal grievance process, the university's internal grievance process, which is required by federal law. That is a process that is formal in nature in that it is similar to a litigation. It culminates in a panel hearing. The panel makes a decision or recommendation that goes to the provost. The provost has the ability to uphold the recommendation or make modifications to it. After that, provost decision is also subject to judicial review or binding arbitration should the petitioner decide to pursue that. However, that process takes several months to proceed and to conclude because it involves several other people, meaning peer hearing panel, their schedules as well. And then the final way in which the Office for Conflict Resolution addresses academic and research misconduct is through teaching and outreach. So we go out to different units that request it, and we provide some training on conflict resolution 101, usually critical communications around types of conduct that might be considered misconduct, whether it be very serious or lower level. So we raise awareness also of our office's resources and also collaborators across the university to address misconduct so it can be taken care of as quickly and at the lowest level possible. Common themes that we see in the academic and research misconduct space, inappropriate, discriminatory, biased, or bullying behavior. Sometimes this behavior that might be lower level than a policy violation. Of course, we do assist folks in getting to university offices, if such as the EOAA, if they would like those allegations investigated. There's also, as a couple of the folks have talked about today, we certainly see a fear of retaliation for raising concerns or reporting. And again, these are folks that are in working relationships with each other for extended periods of time. So that fear of retaliation is real, even if we might think that sometimes it might be oversized, perhaps. Concerns reported to department leadership or HR, lack of accountability, failure to make mandated reports to EOA or provide resources. So sometimes folks come to our office because they've tried to raise their concern internally with their department, with their leadership, with HR, and it's not either being taken seriously or they feel they are not being heard at a minimum. Another theme we see is sometimes with tenured faculty that are in leadership positions, they hesitate to hold their colleagues accountable. There can be various reasons for that. Another theme is a lack of accountability of leadership in units with repeated problems. This theme was touched on a little bit earlier today, and that is hesitation to have a difficult conversation or hesitation just to seek out some resources in order to start those difficult conversations. And then finally, at a significant cost, employees who are impacted often leave the university and seek employment in what they would regard as a more professional workplace. I talked a little bit how we address misconduct through the informal assistance process that is prompt, it's confidential, it's direct consultation, it moves usually pretty quickly. We do make referrals to other university offices where appropriate, option for a facilitated dialogue. And then the second way in which we address this is also through the formal assistance, which I talked about at the beginning. It is a process that it's outlined in OCR's administrative and Board of Regents policy. It provides due process and jurisdictional guidelines written in policy. It is a peer hearing process where the recommendation is subject to the provost's review, and the provost's decision is subject to binding arbitration or judicial review at the option primarily of the petitioner. This last slide is a snapshot of the demand for OCR services in addressing academic and research misconduct, as well as other complaints. The highlight here is it varies. It has varied quite a bit. In the last year, the snapshot is a 60% increase in informal assistance and a doubling of the requests for facilitated dialogues and mediations. There are various reasons for this. Part of it certainly is the complete remote work environment, the challenges of the pandemic, and then usually breakdowns in regular forms of communication. There are other reasons as well, but this is a snapshot of a comparison between those two fiscal years and and where we were in the last fiscal year. Did folks have any questions or?
Yeah, we're gonna wrap up with Chief Compliance Officer. We are running a little late, but I do want to get some questions. So, Mr. Kumar?
Thank you, Chair Kenyanya, members of the committee. So a quick overview again of the Office of Institutional Compliance. We were established in 2006. We are one of the more senior compliance programs among higher ed institutions, and particularly in the Big Ten. We manage approximately 225 hotline reports a year. Now, those reports are rarely investigated through our office, very rarely, and typically they are sent out to other areas. We disposition them. We keep oversight of the process. But when Quinn mentioned earlier some of the duplicate reporting, that's why, although when the reports come into our office, we also do work in analyzing the report, determining the appropriate place for it to go, and then oversight of the outcome as well through a high-level consultative team that involves myself, internal audit, the general counsel's office, and our VP of HR. In addition to the hotline, our office also conducts compliance risk review on high-risk compliance areas within the institution to ensure that those areas have appropriate compliance structures around them that would meet the 7 elements of an effective compliance program in the federal sentencing guidelines. And our program also coordinates the executive level oversight of the compliance through the Executive Oversight Compliance Committee and the Compliance Partner Committee. So our administrative policy, which as the Chief Compliance Officer, I'm the responsible officer and owner of this policy establishes behavior in the institution that all members of our community act with honesty and integrity, and they follow the law. So pretty basic and straightforward, but that's where that expectation is established. And it also establishes reporting expectations that community members or other individuals who believe in good faith that misconduct has happened, they have a duty to report that to the institution. And I covered the U-Report management process in some detail about a year ago, I think now. And but I just wanted to with this committee, but I just wanted to share this slide that gives a high level overview to how U-Reports are managed when they come into our office. So as you can see, when a U-Report is submitted, a consultative team reviews that report. So each and every one of those. And again, we receive approximately 25 reports a year. From there, that report is dispositioned. If there's enough information to proceed with an investigation, then we will. If not, we make an attempt to go back to the reporter. If it's an anonymous report, but they've used our electronic system, there's still a mechanism by which if they come back and check on the report again, we can leave feedback for them so we can create a communication loop with that anonymous reporter. But once we have enough information to proceed, that we believe that we can proceed with the review, we identify the appropriate area to review that matter. We send it to them. When that area has done their due diligence, when they've done their review or their formal investigation, whatever the case may be, they complete a report for our office. They can use their standard template they have, or we provide a template that collects information such as what was the complaints that you reviewed, who did you interview, what facts did you collect, what were your findings, and what follow-up actions were taken. That information goes back to that committee. So myself, Quinn, general counsel, and our VP for HR, and we review it to make sure that we've all agree that due diligence has been done. If not, then we make recommendations and we send it back to that group where we find another area to follow up a piece of the investigation. So when individuals report through the U-Report system, they have that one step up in oversight of their concerns. So, and again, it can be anonymous and there can be a feedback loop. So to the question of defining misconduct and in response to the audit report from October of 2021, the challenge that was identified is that the Board of Regents policy academic misconduct and the administrative policy research misconduct are using the same definition of misconduct. They're just swapping out the words research misconduct and academic misconduct. And this created an inconsistency and some confusion and what the definition was really related to. Was it academic misconduct or research misconduct? So I was charged with assisting the university to taking a look into this. And this was done through a collaborative approach. So the provost was involved, research administration, internal audit, myself, and our director for policy management. And a lot of discussion went into just the purpose of the academic misconduct policy and how the rest of the policy read in addition to that definition. And really what was determined was that the academic misconduct policy really reads almost in entirety as a research misconduct policy. So the recommendation is that the Board of Regents, and this was made to the board office and it's under consideration at the moment, but that the name of the Board of Regents academic misconduct policy be changed to research misconduct, and that the definition of research misconduct is clearly focused on research and other creative activities. So it's revised a bit, but the intent of the policy then becomes focused on research misconduct. And then once that's done, we'll work through and make corresponding changes through both documents to ensure consistency in the message. So there is an overarching administrative policy as well, continuing the conversation about defining misconduct that I mentioned earlier, that reporting suspected misconduct policy that uses a very broad definition that we believe is broad enough to capture misconduct that is not specifically covered in the research misconduct definition. And this definition reads that a violation of local, state, or federal law or university policy or non-compliance with sponsor regulations or requirements. This includes both Board of Regents policies, the Code of Conduct, and student conduct. And a few examples of this would include sexual harassment, theft, plagiarism, or breach of the privacy policy. So again, we feel that this provides a nice safety net for anything that falls outside of that definition of research misconduct. Okay, so also mentioned in the audit report was the idea of comprehensive reporting and the need for having a comprehensive report. This is something that my office and a few others have been interested in for some time. So there has been a dialogue about this. So in collaboration with stakeholders, a plan is currently being developed to aggregate data from our key compliance risk areas. And these potentially include those areas that I have listed here. But one of the challenges, and we're looking forward to working through this, will be how do we sort out those duplicate reports? How do we identify them to make sure that things aren't being reported twice or even 3 times? Are we looking at matters that went through an informal process, as was mentioned? Are we talking about only those matters that go through a formal investigation process? So all of those details are being worked out, but where we see this leading is ultimately having a report that gives a broader picture of compliance reporting and investigations in the institution. And so, of course, some potential benefits to this would be trend spotting, the ability to reduce some duplication and effort if matters are being reviewed in more than one area simultaneously, and just better decision-making with this information available. And then also mentioned was the idea of a common case management platform. This is sort of the hidden treasure every compliance office is looking for. And I've had this conversation over the years with my peers. Some institutions have some version of this, most do not. But there's definitely challenges with it. The benefit would be that if we had a common case management platform for all of our compliance concerns, it would allow for consistent documentation and as appropriate would allow other units to view cases outside of their unit. There could be some benefits to this, but obviously there could be some risk as well. I mean, privacy concerns, we all handle very sensitive information, so all of these things have to be considered. And so the plan is to explore different options. We're identifying potential users, potential products that are on the marketplace, and then discussing the feasibility with the stakeholders and leadership. And really for a system like this, you would have to have a majority of the players on board, I think, to make it worth it, because there would certainly be some cost with a platform like this as well. And that's the end of my prepared remarks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all. We do have just like 3 minutes remaining and 2 more agenda items. Are there any questions from Regents? Oh, Regent Down.
I just need a quick response. I'm interested, Ms. Gronval, regarding OCR compliance. On your common themes, number 4 and 5, with 4 being holding colleagues accountable and 5 units with repeat problems. First, I want to say I have appreciation for the training and education you do. My question is, do you see, as one progresses through leadership, that there's less issues, that there's an education component as one moves up in leadership rank in the formal process, whereas they may be a leader informally? Do you see that there's a progression in skill in dealing with these issues?
Thank you, Chair Kenyana and Regent Davenport. In my experience, I've been here at the university about 2.5 years, and about two years of that has been during the remote work environment. But in my experience, there does appear to be more training opportunities through OHR or leadership and talent development for folks in leadership. But certainly, it's always beneficial for folks in leadership positions to take training outside of obviously what OCR provides and supports, to learn about how to make the mandated reports or how to address concerns of inappropriate misconduct, whether it's academic or research-based. But my experience too is that there's a significant variability across the university units. Some units I think are well ahead of other units, and some units they need a lot of support and they need a lot of help.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I just have 2 quick, or I really just one. Chief Auditor Galswick, you talked about the Provost's task force on faculty behavior in graduate education. I think that's the title, and I think we're expecting that report in March. Some regents, maybe a year, maybe more than that ago, were able to speak with some graduate students, and I learned a lot about that, especially the nature, of that relationship and how important it is. And I would hope that maybe that's a discussion we could have possibly in Regent Davenport's committee sometime in the future. I think that's very important. Thank you for the presentation. I wish we had more time for this, but I'm sure we can send follow-up questions, through the committee and through the chief auditor. With that, we'll move on to the last 2 agenda items. I'll invite the chief auditor back up to give us the internal audit update as well as information items.
All right, thank you, Chair Kenyanya. I will try to keep this very brief, as I know we are now in overtime. If you draw your attention to page 106 of your docket material is where our audit update begins, but I'll direct you straight down to page 109 where we have our follow-up results. Our implementation rate for our outstanding essential items this period was 32%. That is below our expected rate of 40%. However, I think it is important to note that 2/3 of the outstanding items are from what we consider first-time follow-up. So in some cases, these have only been issued for a few months, so units have not had as much time to work on them. That being said, 42% of the open items were identified as past due. That is an improvement, however, over last period where 76% were past due. We have 6 audits that have a total of 8 essential items that have gone beyond the 2-year mark. And that is detailed on page 110. So when that happens, we provide a little bit additional information to the committee on what the reasons for the delay, work that is being done in this space, et cetera. I think it's also worth noting President Gable did issue a memo to her leadership team, just re-emphasizing the importance of timely implementation of these essential items and asking them to provide us updated remediation plans for how they're going to address it. We did have 6 audits that completed all of their outstanding essential items. That's on page 126. We always want to give kudos to those groups that are able to get through all of these items. In some cases, these are very complex topics that took a considerable effort. There's also some details regarding the ongoing remediation efforts with the Identity and Access Management Collaborative Assessment. As we've told the committee previously, the collaborative assessment approach is a little bit different, where we handle it more as a joint risk assessment. So it doesn't really just yield itself as well to our regular follow-up schedule. So instead, we're having them provide this report, especially regarding the high-risk items, and eventually internal audit will go back in to review to confirm that the implementation has occurred as stated. The other audit activity that we have included on page 129, we note there are 9 audits that we completed this period and 1 SNAP review. All 9 of them are rated our highest rating of good. We only identified 3 essential items across all of those reports. In the interest of time, I won't go through the details of all of those, except to highlight another collaborative assessment that we completed, which was on employee visa and immigration. Again, conducted as a joint risk assessment. In this particular review, there were no high-risk items that were identified. And talking to Vice President Horstman and others associated with this report, we thought it would be most appropriate to address some of these issues as part of the PEAK initiative. So we're currently working through that with the administration. That'll likely happen in the fall. Finally, back to page 108, from other notes, we are currently down 4 of our 16 auditors. This is especially acute in our IT audit space, where we're looking to replace our IT audit director role, as well as another role. So that is my former role. We're working through that. We're currently trying to hire, but that may impact our audit plan. And I have some details included there on the potential audits that we would defer or delay if that is required. As for the informational items, I'll just hit that agenda item here very briefly. There's 2 informational items associated with committee oversight of work done by outside auditing firms. This is just informational. There's no expected impediments to independence associated with these 2 engagements. So with that, I will stand for any questions you may have on those 2 agenda items.
Thank you. Committee members, any questions on items 4 and 5? All right, seeing none, we are in overtime, as you put it. So this committee will stand adjourned. Please be back here in 10 minutes for the next committee at 9:15. Thank you.